Billionaire CEO orders steak. Black waitress slips him a note that stops him cold. A billionaire CEO walks into his own restaurant, and nobody knows who he is. Sounds like the start of a joke, right? But what happened next will make your blood boil and restore your faith in humanity all at the same time. Dominic Carver had everything. At 47, he was the founder of Carver Capital Holdings, with a penthouse overlooking Central Park and an empire worth $3 billion. But on this humid Tuesday evening in Charleston, South Carolina, he looked like just another guy in jeans and a polo shirt, walking into the Palmetto House, one of his own luxury hospitality investments. He had no idea he was about to discover something that would shake him to his core. Quick question before we dive in. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. And hey, if you're curious already, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Alright, let's jump in. You see, Dominic hadn't planned this visit. He was supposed to be in meetings all day, but something had been eating at him for weeks. Whispers he couldn't ignore. Anonymous complaints about his Charleston restaurant that made his stomach turn. Stories about racially biased service that he prayed weren't true. So he did something most billionaire CEOs would never do. He got in his black Tesla Model S, drove 4 hours south, and decided to see for himself what was really happening behind those velvet drapes and gold-rimmed glassware. The moment Dominic stepped through those heavy oak doors, he felt it. The change in the air. The way conversations seemed to pause just a beat too long. The way the hostess's smile faltered when she looked at him, really looked at him. "Table for one?" she asked, her voice polite but cold. There were empty tables everywhere, but somehow she needed to check availability. As Dominic waited, he noticed something that made his heart sink. On the walls hung these massive ornate paintings. Beautiful gold frames surrounding portraits of men in military uniforms. Confederate portraits. Not labeled, not explained, just hanging there like they belonged, like they were normal. This was his restaurant. His investment. His name is attached to this place. But what happened at dinner was just the beginning. The hostess finally seated him, at the worst table in the house, right next to the kitchen doors where servers rushed past with hot plates. The noise was incredible. Any other customer would have complained immediately. But Dominic wasn't any other customer. He was gathering evidence. His server approached with that same forced smile. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink?" "Just water for now," Dominic said. "And I'll take a look at your menu." "Of course." She handed him the leather-bound menu and walked away. That's when Dominic noticed her. The only black server in the entire dining room. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, moving between tables with this careful precision. She served every table except his. Even though she walked past him a dozen times, even though she made eye contact once and he saw something flash across her face. Recognition? Fear? He couldn't tell. When his server finally returned, Dominic ordered their signature dish. "I'll have the ribeye steak, medium rare. And your house salad to start." "Excellent choice, sir." But as she walked away, Dominic caught something in her voice. Something that made him look up from his phone. The way she said "excellent choice" sounded almost mocking. 20 minutes later, his salad arrived. Fresh greens, perfect presentation. Dominic took a bite and immediately knew something was wrong. The dressing tasted off. Not spoiled exactly, but different. Like someone had added something that didn't belong. His stomach started to turn. Not from food poisoning, not yet anyway, but from the horrible realization of what might be happening here. That's when the black waitress walked past his table again. And this time, she did something that changed everything. She dropped her cleaning rag. Right next to his chair. As she bent to pick it up, she whispered something so quietly that Dominic almost missed it. "Don't eat the food." His blood went cold. She straightened up, cleaning rag in hand, and walked away like nothing had happened. But Dominic's world had just tilted off its axis. His own restaurant. His own investment. And they were deliberately contaminating food ordered by black customers. Dominic sat there, with a steak knife in his hand, staring at his half-eaten salad. This wasn't just about bad service or uncomfortable looks anymore. This was about something much darker. Something that made him understand why those anonymous complaints had kept him awake at night. He looked around the dining room with new eyes. The way the staff moved. The way they spoke to different customers. The way that one black waitress seemed to carry herself like she was walking through a minefield. But here's what you need to understand about Dominic Carver. He didn't build a $3 billion empire by backing down from fights. He built it by being smarter than everyone else in the room. And right now, he was the smartest person nobody knew was there. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Not to call his lawyers, not yet. Not to call the police, not yet. He was texting his head of security, asking for something very specific. Kitchen cameras. He needed to see exactly what was happening back there. Because if what he suspected was true, this wasn't just about one restaurant. This wasn't just about one bad manager or one racist chef. This was about a system. A culture. A way of thinking that had been allowed to grow and spread like cancer through his own business. And he was about to cut it out. The black waitress walked past his table one more time. This time, she didn't drop anything. This time, she didn't whisper. But this time, she left something behind that would change both their lives forever. A napkin. Folded in half. Tucked just under the edge of his bread plate where only he would see it. Dominic's hands shook as he reached for it. Before we find out what was written on that napkin, you need to understand who Dominic Carver really was. Because what happened next only makes sense when you know where he came from. Dominic grew up in Detroit, in a neighborhood where the streetlights didn't work and the corner stores had bulletproof glass. His mom, Sarah, worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. His dad? Well, his dad left when Dominic was 7, and Sarah never talked about why. But Sarah Carver was tough. Every morning before her first job at the hospital laundry, she'd sit Dominic down at their tiny kitchen table and make him promise 3 things. Work harder than everyone else. Never let anyone tell you what you can't do. And never forget where you came from. That last one was the hardest. By the time Dominic was 30, he'd already made his first million in real estate development. By 35, he was worth $50 million. By 40, he'd founded Carver Capital Holdings and was buying up luxury hospitality properties across the South. Hotels, restaurants, event spaces, all the places that used to exclude people who looked like him. But success changes people. Slowly, quietly, in ways you don't notice until it's too late. Dominic's penthouse overlooking Central Park had marble countertops that cost more than most people's houses. His closet was full of suits that cost more than his mom's monthly salary. He ate at restaurants where the waiters knew his name and the wine list had bottles worth more than cars. He told himself he was different. He told himself he remembered. But when was the last time he'd actually visited his old neighborhood? When was the last time he'd eaten at a place where he worried about the prices? When was the last time someone had treated him badly because of the color of his skin? The truth was, Dominic Carver had been insulated by wealth for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be powerless. Almost. That's why those anonymous complaints hit him so hard. 3 different people had written to corporate headquarters about the Palmetto House. 3 different stories about cold service, long waits, and food that tasted wrong when black customers ordered it. The complaints were vague, hard to prove, easy to dismiss. Most CEOs would have sent a memo to management and called it handled. But something about those letters reminded Dominic of his mom. The way she used to come home from work, exhausted and frustrated, telling stories about how some of the doctors treated the black staff differently. How they talked over her, ignored her suggestions, made her feel invisible even when she was the most experienced person in the room. Dominic, she used to say, the worst kind of evil is the kind that hides behind smiles. So when Dominic walked into the Palmetto House that Tuesday evening, he wasn't just investigating a business complaint. He was looking for the kind of evil his mother had warned him about. And now, sitting at that terrible table next to the kitchen doors, holding a folded napkin in his trembling hands, he was about to find it. But first, let me tell you about Danielle Rivers. Danielle was 26 years old and had been working at the Palmetto House for 8 months. She'd moved to Charleston from Atlanta after her grandmother got sick, and she needed a job that paid enough to help with medical bills while she saved money to finish law school. The Palmetto House seemed perfect on paper. Upscale restaurant, good tips, flexible schedule. What they didn't mention in the job interview was that she'd be the only black server on staff. What they didn't mention was that the kitchen staff had their own special way of handling orders from certain tables. Danielle's first week, she thought she was imagining things. The way the chef, Marcus Webb, would smirk when she brought back orders from black customers. The way the other servers would whisper and laugh when she walked by. The way her tip money always seemed to come up short at the end of the night. But by her second week, she knew she wasn't imagining anything. She watched Marcus spit in a soup bowl before sending it out to a young black couple celebrating their anniversary. She saw him drop a steak on the floor and put it back on the plate when the order was for an older black gentleman dining alone. She heard him joke about seasoning the food properly for certain customers. Danielle wanted to quit. She should have quit. But her grandmother's medical bills were piling up, and jobs weren't easy to find. So she stayed quiet, kept her head down, and tried to survive. Until tonight. When Danielle saw Dominic Carver walk into the restaurant, she almost dropped the water pitcher she was carrying. She'd seen his photo in business magazines, knew he was one of the investors behind the Palmetto House. But what was he doing here, dressed like a regular customer, being treated like... Oh no. She watched the hostess make him wait. She watched them seat him at the worst table. She watched her coworker take his order with that same fake smile she'd seen 100 times before. And she knew exactly what was about to happen in that kitchen. Danielle had a choice to make. Keep quiet, keep her job, keep surviving. Or risk everything to warn a stranger about what was coming. It took her 15 minutes to work up the courage. 15 minutes of watching Dominic eat the contaminated salad, seeing the confusion on his face, knowing that the steak was going to be so much worse. When she dropped her cleaning rag and whispered, "Don't eat the food," she felt her hand shaking. But when she walked away and saw him push the salad aside, she knew she'd done the right thing. But she wasn't done yet. Because Danielle Rivers had been saving something for months. Something she'd been too scared to use, too worried about the consequences. But watching this man, this powerful, successful man, being treated exactly the way she'd been watching other customers get treated, she realized something important. Courage is contagious. Dominic unfolded the napkin with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The message was written in blue ink, the handwriting rushed but clear. They spit in your food. Kitchen cameras don't record everything. This place is not safe. Meet me by the back exit in 10 minutes. D. He read it twice before the words really sank in. This wasn't just about bad service or cold looks. This was about deliberate, calculated cruelty. This was about people who were supposed to represent his company, his values, his investment, deliberately poisoning customers because of the color of their skin. Dominic looked around the dining room again. The Confederate portraits seemed to stare back at him now, their eyes following his movement. How had he never noticed them before? How had none of his management team mentioned them? How had this entire culture of hatred been allowed to flourish right under his nose? The answer hit him like a punch to the stomach. Because he'd been too far removed. Too insulated. Too comfortable in his penthouse overlooking Central Park to understand what was really happening in his own businesses. He thought about his mother, Sarah, and what she would say if she could see this place. She'd worked her whole life in environments where she had to smile through disrespect, where she had to accept treatment that would have made other people quit immediately. She'd done it because she had no choice, because she had a son to feed and bills to pay. And now, 30 years later, her son owned a place that was doing the exact same thing to other people's children. Dominic folded the napkin carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He left $40 on the table, way more than necessary for a meal he couldn't finish eating, and walked toward the back of the restaurant. The back exit led to a small alley behind the Palmetto House, where the dumpsters were kept and servers came to smoke cigarettes during their breaks. Dominic had never seen this part of his own restaurant before. The glamorous front entrance with its brass fixtures and marble floors felt like a different world compared to this narrow, dimly lit space. He didn't have to wait long. The door opened quietly, and the black waitress stepped out. Up close, Dominic could see how young she was. Maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. She glanced around nervously before approaching him. "You're him, aren't you?" she said quietly. "Dominic Carver. One of the owners." "How did you know?" "I read business magazines when I can't sleep." She managed a weak smile. "Plus, you have the same look my law professors used to get when they were trying to solve a really hard problem." "You're in law school?" "Was. I had to drop out when my grandmother got sick." She shook her head. "But that's not why we're here." Danielle looked around the alley one more time, then pulled out her phone. "My name is Danielle Rivers. And I need to show you something that's going to make you sick." She opened her photo gallery and handed him the phone. "I've been documenting this for months. I kept thinking someone would notice, someone would care, someone would stop it. But it just kept getting worse." Dominic scrolled through the photos, and each one made his stomach turn harder. Marcus Webb, the head chef, spitting into a soup bowl. The same chef dropping food on the floor and putting it back on plates. Screenshots of text messages between kitchen staff, joking about extra seasoning for certain customers. But the worst photo was the last one. It showed Marcus Webb holding up a plate of food, grinning at the camera, with a handwritten sign behind him that said, "Black Friday Special." The date stamp showed it was taken just 3 weeks ago. "Jesus Christ," Dominic whispered. "It gets worse," Danielle said. "The kitchen cameras? They're on a system that automatically deletes footage after 48 hours. But Marcus has access to the system. He knows when health inspectors are coming, when corporate visits are scheduled. He makes sure the cameras show partial footage, possible tampering on the days when anything serious happens." Dominic looked up from the phone. "Why didn't you report this? Why didn't you call the health department, or the police, or—" "With what proof?" Danielle's voice was quiet but firm. "My word against his? A black waitress against a white chef who's been here for 5 years? In Charleston, South Carolina." She shook her head. "I needed this job. My grandmother needed her medicine. And I figured nobody would believe me anyway." "But you're telling me now." "Because you're powerful enough to actually do something about it." Danielle took her phone back and looked directly at him. "I've been watching you for months, reading about your company, hoping maybe someday someone like you would walk in here and see what I see every single day." "What exactly do you see?" Danielle was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but full of pain. "I see a crime scene in a tuxedo," she said. "I see a place that looks perfect on the outside, but inside it's rotting. I see customers who trust that their food is safe, that they're welcome, that they're being treated with basic human dignity. And I see staff who think it's funny to violate that trust." She pointed toward the restaurant's back door. "In there, Marcus Webb is probably preparing your steak right now. And he's probably doing things to it that would make you throw up. Because he knows you're black, and he thinks that makes it okay." Dominic felt something burning in his chest. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Something deeper. Something that reminded him of being 7 years old, watching his mother cry after a particularly bad day at work, not understanding why people were so cruel to someone as good and kind as she was. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I want you to be the mirror this place needs," Danielle said. "I want you to show them what they really are, not what they pretend to be." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "Everything's on here. Photos, videos, text message screenshots, voice recordings. I've been building this for months, hoping someday I'd have the courage to use it. And now I'm looking at someone who has the power to make sure this never happens to anyone else." She pressed the USB drive into his hand. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "I need you to promise that when this is over, when the dust settles, when the lawyers and the reporters and the health inspectors are gone, I need you to promise that this doesn't just become another news story that people forget about in a week." Dominic closed his fingers around the USB drive. What do you want instead? I want you to help me rebuild this place the right way. From the ground up. With people who understand that integrity still matters. Danielle's voice got stronger. I want to go back to law school, but I also want to stay here and make sure this never happens again. Not just here, but anywhere. You want to be the director of ethics and culture. I want to be the person who makes sure every server, every chef, every manager understands that when people walk into this restaurant, they're trusting us with something precious. Their time, their money, their belief that they deserve to be treated with dignity. Dominic looked at this young woman, this brave, brilliant young woman who had risked everything to hand him a weapon of truth, and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about fixing one restaurant anymore. This wasn't just about stopping one racist chef or firing one bad manager. This was about proving that his mother had been right all along. That the worst kind of evil was the kind that hid behind smiles. And that the best kind of courage was the kind that refused to stay silent. Danielle, he said, how fast can you type up a formal statement about everything you've witnessed? Why? Dominic smiled for the first time all evening. Because tomorrow morning, this story is going to be front-page news. And by tomorrow afternoon, this place is going to look very, very different. But neither of them knew just how dangerous the next 24 hours were going to be. If you've made it this far, this story moved you, and that means it matters. Please subscribe, like and share now, my lovely viewers. Your support helps us share stories that need to be told. Someone out there is waiting to hear the next one. That night, Dominic didn't sleep. He sat in his hotel room, not the penthouse suite the Charleston Grand usually reserved for him, but a regular room he'd booked under a fake name, staring at his laptop screen and feeling his world crumble piece by piece. The USB drive Danielle had given him contained horrors he never could have imagined. Not just the photos and videos he'd already seen, but hours of audio recordings. Conversations between kitchen staff about which customers deserved special treatment. Text message chains that read like something out of the worst chapters of American history. But the thing that made Dominic's hands shake with rage was a video Danielle had secretly recorded just 2 weeks earlier. Marcus Webb, the head chef, was training a new kitchen assistant. A young white kid, maybe 19 years old, fresh out of culinary school and eager to learn. In the video, Marcus was showing him how to handle difficult orders. See, when you get an order from table 12, Marcus was saying, pointing to a section of the dining room where black customers were typically seated, you gotta understand something. These people, they're not like our regular customers. They don't appreciate quality anyway, so we don't waste our best ingredients on them. The kid looked uncomfortable. But isn't that illegal? Discriminatory? Hell no, Marcus laughed. We're not refusing service. We're just adjusting our standards. They want cheap food, we give them cheap food. Plus a little extra seasoning they'll never know about. The kid's face went pale as Marcus demonstrated exactly what that extra seasoning involved. But what if someone finds out? The kid asked. Who's gonna find out? The cameras? I control the camera system. The other servers? They know better than to bite the hand that feeds them. The management. Marcus grinned. Trust me, kid. Management likes things exactly the way they are. That last line hit Dominic like a freight train. This wasn't just about one rogue chef. This was about a system that went all the way up the chain. He immediately called his head of security, James Morrison, a former FBI agent who'd been handling sensitive investigations for Carver Capital Holdings for 3 years. James, I need you in Charleston. Tonight. What's the situation? Bring your forensics team. And James? When you get here, I need you to treat this like a federal case. Because by the time we're done, it might be one. By 6 a.m., James and his team were at the Palmetto House. Dominic met them in the alley behind the restaurant, the same place where Danielle had handed him the USB drive that changed everything. What are we looking for? James asked. Evidence of food tampering, destruction of security footage, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations. Dominic handed him the USB drive. But James, I need you to be careful. Danielle Rivers, the waitress who brought this to my attention. She's still working here. As far as anyone knows, she has no idea I'm the owner. You want to keep her cover intact. I want to keep her alive." James raised an eyebrow. "You think it's that serious?" Before Dominic could answer, his phone rang. Unknown number, Charleston area code. "Mr. Carver?" The voice was young, shaky, scared. "Who is this?" "This is Tommy Rodriguez. I work in the kitchen at the Palmetto House. I think you need to know something." Dominic's blood went cold. "How did you get this number?" "Danielle gave it to me. She said you were investigating what's been happening here." The kid's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Carver, they know." "They know what?" "They know someone's been recording them. Marcus found one of Danielle's hiding spots last night. He found the backup phone she was using to document everything." Dominic closed his eyes. "Is she safe?" "For now. But Marcus called a meeting this morning before the restaurant opens. He told all the kitchen staff to come in early. He said they need to handle a security problem." "What kind of security problem?" "He didn't say exactly. But Mr. Carver." Tommy's voice broke. "I heard him talking to the manager last night. They were talking about making sure certain people understand the consequences of disloyalty." Dominic felt his world tilt. "Tommy, where are you right now?" "I'm at home. I called in sick. I couldn't be part of whatever they're planning." "Good. Stay home. Don't go back there until you hear from me." "What about Danielle?" That was the question that was eating Dominic alive. Danielle was scheduled to work the lunch shift. In 3 hours, she was going to walk into that restaurant not knowing that her cover had been blown. Not knowing that Marcus Webb and his crew had spent the night planning how to deal with her. "James," Dominic said after hanging up, "change of plans. We're not just looking for evidence anymore. We're preventing a crime." But as they approached the restaurant's back entrance, they heard voices coming from inside. Angry voices. Men's voices. And one woman's voice that Dominic recognized immediately. Danielle was already inside. Through the kitchen window, Dominic could see Marcus Webb standing in the center of the room, surrounded by 5 other men. Kitchen staff, servers, even the assistant manager. They'd formed a circle around Danielle, who was standing with her back straight and her chin up, but Dominic could see the fear in her eyes. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Marcus was saying. "You think you can sneak around, recording conversations, taking pictures, playing spy?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Danielle replied, but her voice was shaky. "Don't lie to me." Marcus slammed his hand on the prep table. "We found your backup phone. We saw the videos. We know exactly what you've been doing." One of the other men stepped closer to Danielle. "The question is, who are you working for? The health department? Some civil rights group? Or are you just a troublemaker who doesn't understand how things work around here?" Dominic started toward the door, but James grabbed his arm. "Wait," James whispered. "If we go in there now, without proper backup, without legal authority, we could make things worse for her. They're threatening her. And if we play this wrong, they'll claim we were trespassing, that anything we recorded was inadmissible, that the whole investigation is invalid." James pulled out his phone. "Give me 2 minutes to call the Charleston PD. We need this done by the book." But 2 minutes felt like 2 hours as Dominic watched the men close in around Danielle. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're going to give us every recording, every photo, every piece of evidence you think you have. And then you're going to quit this job and leave Charleston. Tonight." "And if I don't?" Marcus smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Dominic had ever seen. "Let's just say that accidents happen in restaurant kitchens all the time. Hot grease, sharp knives, heavy equipment. Especially to employees who don't follow safety protocols." That's when Dominic saw something that made his heart stop. Marcus Webb was holding a knife. A big one. The kind used for cutting meat. and he was pointing it directly at Danielle. "James," Dominic said quietly, "how long until the police get here?" 5 minutes. Danielle doesn't have 5 minutes. Dominic reached for the kitchen door, but before he could open it, something incredible happened. Danielle looked Marcus Webb straight in the eye and said 6 words that changed everything. "I already gave it to him." The room went dead silent. "Gave what to who?" Marcus demanded. Danielle smiled for the first time since Dominic had met her. A real smile. A brave smile. A smile that said she wasn't afraid anymore because she knew she wasn't alone. "Everything," she said. "I gave everything to Dominic Carver." And that's when all hell broke loose. The silence in that kitchen lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Marcus Webb exploded. "Dominic Carver," he screamed, the knife still in his hand. "You gave our business to Dominic fucking Carver?" "Our business." Danielle's voice was steady now, stronger than Dominic had ever heard it. "You mean your criminal enterprise?" But Marcus wasn't listening. He was pacing back and forth, the knife glinting under the fluorescent lights, his face twisted with rage and something else, panic. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he said. "Do you understand who you're messing with?" "Yeah," Danielle said quietly. "I'm messing with racist criminals who spit in people's food and think it's funny." That's when one of the other men, the assistant manager, Robert Hayes, spoke up. "Marcus, calm down. Maybe she's bluffing. Maybe she doesn't really know anything." "She knows everything." Marcus spun around to face him. "She's been recording us for months. She has photos, videos, audio recordings, everything. So what do we do?" And that's when Dominic heard something that made his blood freeze. Something that turned this from a case of workplace harassment into something much, much darker. "We stick to the plan," Marcus said. "The same plan we used with Jessica." Danielle's face went white. "What plan? Who's Jessica?" Robert Hayes shot Marcus a warning look. "Marcus, shut up." But Marcus was beyond caring about keeping secrets. "Jessica Martinez. The other black server who used to work here. The one who started asking too many questions about why certain customers always seem to get sick after eating here. What happened to Jessica?" Danielle's voice was barely a whisper. "She had an accident," Marcus said with that same cruel smile. "Slipped and fell down the stairs outside her apartment building. Broke her leg in 3 places. Funny thing is, after she got out of the hospital, she decided Charleston wasn't the right place for her anymore. Moved back to Mexico. Never filed any complaints. Never talked to any reporters. Just disappeared." Dominic felt like he was going to be sick. This wasn't just about food tampering anymore. This was about intimidation, threats, violence. And from the way Marcus was talking, Jessica Martinez hadn't slipped and fell at all. "You see, Danielle," Marcus continued, moving closer to her, "sometimes people need to learn that there are consequences for causing trouble. Sometimes they need to understand that certain secrets are meant to stay buried." That's when Dominic made a decision that probably saved Danielle's life. He burst through the kitchen door. "Gentlemen," he said in the calmest voice he could manage, "I think we need to talk." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. 3 of the men scattered toward different exits. Robert Hayes dropped the clipboard he was holding and started stammering apologies. Marcus Webb spun around with the knife still in his hand, his eyes wide with shock and rage. But Danielle's reaction was the one that mattered most. She looked at Dominic with relief and gratitude and something else, respect. Because she realized he hadn't just come to rescue her. He'd come to stand with her. "Mr. Carver," Marcus said, trying to force his voice back to normal. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you today." "I'll bet you weren't." Dominic stepped further into the kitchen, and that's when Marcus noticed that Dominic wasn't alone. James Morrison and 2 other security specialists had followed him in, along with 3 Charleston police officers. "Marcus Webb," one of the officers said, "you're under arrest for criminal threatening, assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit civil rights violations." "This is bullshit." Marcus screamed as they cuffed him. She's lying. She's making it all up. Actually, Dominic said, pulling out his phone, she's not making up anything. Because I've been recording this entire conversation. Marcus's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds. That's right, Dominic continued. Every threat you just made, every admission of guilt, every detail about what happened to Jessica Martinez, it's all recorded. And it's all going to be evidence in your trial. But as the police led Marcus away, he turned back with a look of pure hatred. You think this is over? He said to Danielle. You think arresting me is going to change anything? This place has been running this way for years. Years. And it's not just here. You have no idea how deep this goes. The kitchen door slammed shut behind him, but his words hung in the air like smoke. Danielle sank into a chair, the adrenaline finally wearing off. What did he mean? How deep what goes? Dominic looked at James, who was already on his phone with his forensics team. The answer to Danielle's question was about to get very complicated. Sir, James said after hanging up, you need to see this. He handed Dominic a tablet showing security footage from the restaurant's main camera system. But this wasn't footage from the kitchen. This was from the dining room, the host station, the bar area. We pulled the last 6 months of data before they could delete it, James explained. And we found something interesting. The footage showed what looked like normal restaurant operations. Customers coming and going, servers taking orders, managers walking around. But when James started pointing out patterns, Dominic began to see what he meant. Look at the seating charts, James said. Look at which tables black customers get assigned to, and which tables they don't. Look at the wait times. Look at how the staff interacts with different groups of people. It was all there. A systematic pattern of discrimination that went far beyond what Marcus Webb was doing in the kitchen. The hostess consistently seated black customers in the worst sections. Servers took longer to approach their tables. Managers rarely checked on their dining experience. Even the busboys cleared their plates more slowly. This isn't just about one racist chef, Dominic said quietly. This is about an entire culture of exclusion. It gets worse, James said. He swiped to another screen showing financial records. Look at the profit margins for the past 2 years. Look at the customer satisfaction scores. Look at the online reviews. The numbers told a story that made Dominic sick. The Palmetto House had been systematically driving away black customers, while maintaining high ratings from white customers. They'd created a business model based on exclusion, and it was profitable. Sir, one of the forensic specialists called from across the kitchen, you need to see this. He was standing next to a filing cabinet that had been locked until James's team opened it. Inside were documents that revealed the true scope of what they were dealing with. Employment records showing a pattern of firing black servers for minor infractions while excusing major mistakes by white staff. Training manuals that included coded language about maintaining standards and understanding our clientele. Insurance claims for accidents involving black employees that seemed suspiciously frequent. And at the bottom of the stack, a folder labeled Problem Employees. Inside that folder were detailed files on every black person who had ever worked at the Palmetto House. Photos, personal information, home addresses, records of their work performance that had been deliberately falsified, and notes about corrective actions that had been taken. Jessica Martinez's file was 3 inches thick. Jesus, Danielle whispered, looking over Dominic's shoulder. They've been doing this for years. But the worst revelation was yet to come. At the very bottom of Jessica's file was a business card. A private investigator's card, with handwritten notes about surveillance, intimidation tactics, and incident management. The same private investigator whose card appeared in 4 other problem employee files. Dominic, James said quietly, this isn't just a restaurant. This is a case study in institutional racism. And from the looks of these records, the Palmetto House isn't the only property in your portfolio that's been operating this way. Dominic felt the room spinning around him. His entire empire, everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd used to honor his mother's memory, had been infected with the very evil she'd spent her life fighting against. "How many?" he asked. James was already pulling up financial records on his laptop. "Preliminary analysis suggests at least 12 properties across 5 states. All following similar patterns. All showing the same profit margins, the same customer demographics, the same incident reports." Danielle stood up slowly, her face pale but determined. "What are you going to do?" Dominic looked around the kitchen where Marcus Webb had just threatened her life. He thought about Jessica Martinez, somewhere in Mexico, probably still afraid to speak up about what had happened to her. He thought about every black customer who had eaten contaminated food, every black employee who had been fired for speaking up, every person who had been made to feel unwelcome in places that bore his name. And he thought about his mother, Sarah, who had taught him that integrity still matters. "I'm going to burn it all down," he said quietly. "And then we're going to build something better." But he had no idea that the worst was yet to come. 3 days later, Dominic's world was on fire. The story had exploded across every major news network. Billionaire's restaurant empire built on systematic racism. Hidden camera footage reveals food tampering at luxury Charleston eatery. Former employees come forward with stories of intimidation and violence. But the media attention was just the beginning. By Thursday morning, Dominic was facing federal civil rights investigations, class action lawsuits from former employees, health department shutdowns at 7 of his properties, and a complete collapse of his company's stock price. Carver Capital Holdings had lost $2.3 billion in market value in 72 hours. His board of directors was calling for emergency meetings. His investors were threatening to pull out. His lawyers were telling him to prepare for criminal charges. And somewhere in Mexico, Jessica Martinez had come forward to tell her story about what had really happened the night she fell down those stairs. But the worst part wasn't the financial devastation or the legal troubles. The worst part was the doubt that was eating him alive from the inside. Sitting in his hotel room in Charleston, he still couldn't bring himself to leave until this was resolved. Dominic stared at his laptop screen showing email after email from other employees at other properties. Stories that made the Palmetto House look like just the tip of the iceberg. A hotel in Atlanta where black guests were consistently given rooms next to the elevator or ice machine. A restaurant in Nashville where black servers were required to take a cultural sensitivity test that white servers never had to take. A catering company in Savannah where black employees were told they couldn't work certain high-profile events because they didn't fit the aesthetic. All of it happening under his name. All of it happening while he lived in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, convinced that his success meant he was making a difference. His phone rang. His mother's number. "Dominic? Baby, I've been watching the news. Are you okay?" "No, Mom. I'm not okay." His voice cracked. "I'm not okay at all. Tell me what's wrong." "I failed. I failed you, I failed everyone who trusted me, I failed myself." The words came pouring out. "I built something that was supposed to honor your memory, supposed to prove that we could succeed without compromising our values. And instead, I created a system that was just as bad as everything you fought against." Dominic. "I was so focused on making money, on being successful, on proving I belonged in those boardrooms and country clubs that I stopped paying attention to what was actually happening in my own businesses." He was crying now, something he hadn't done since his mother's cancer diagnosis 5 years earlier. "I became exactly what you warned me about. I became the kind of person who hides behind smiles while evil happens right under their nose." Sarah Carver was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Baby, do you remember what I used to tell you about falling down? That it's not about whether you fall. It's about whether you get back up." "That's right. And do you remember what I told you about fires?" Dominic smiled through his tears. "That fire doesn't destroy everything. It reveals what was already rotting, and it clears the ground so something better can grow. So tell me, baby, what are you going to grow?" Before Dominic could answer, there was a knock at his hotel room door. He opened it to find Danielle Rivers standing in the hallway, holding a thick manila envelope and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," she said. "Danielle, What are you doing here? It's not safe for you to be seen with me. The media, the lawyers. I don't care about the media. And I definitely don't care about the lawyers. She pushed past him into the room. I care about this. She dumped the contents of the manila envelope onto the hotel room desk. Documents, photographs, testimonials. Dozens of them. What is this? This is what happens when courage is contagious, Danielle said. This is what happens when people realize they're not alone anymore. The documents were statements from employees across Dominic's entire business empire. Not just complaints, though there were plenty of those, but also suggestions, plans, ideas for how to fix what was broken. Marcus Webb was right about one thing, Danielle continued. This goes deep. Deeper than we realized. But he was wrong about something else. He said you had no idea how deep it goes. But these people, she gestured to the pile of papers, they've been mapping every single problem, every bad policy, every corrupt manager, every discriminatory practice. Dominic picked up one of the statements. It was from Maria Santos, a housekeeping supervisor at his Atlanta hotel. She documented 2 years of discriminatory scheduling, unequal pay practices, and sexual harassment that was ignored by management. But at the bottom of her statement, she'd written something that made Dominic's heart skip. I don't want to destroy this company. I want to help fix it. Because I've seen what it could be when it's run the right way. They're not just coming forward to tear you down, Danielle said. They're coming forward because they want to be part of building something better. But the board, the investors. Forget the board. Forget the investors. Danielle sat down across from him. I've been talking to employment lawyers, civil rights attorneys, and business ethics professors. You want to know what they all said? What? They said you have a choice. You can spend the next 5 years fighting lawsuits, paying settlements, and watching your empire slowly crumble while you try to protect what's left. Or you can do something nobody expects. Which is? You can be the mirror this entire industry needs. Danielle pulled out her phone and showed him a video. It was shaky, clearly shot on a phone, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed Dominic in the Palmetto House kitchen 3 days earlier, talking to the arresting officers. Every threat you just made, every admission of guilt, every detail about what happened to Jessica Martinez, it's all recorded. And it's all going to be evidence in your trial. Someone leaked this? Dominic asked. I leaked this, Danielle said quietly. Because I realized something. People need to see that you're not trying to cover this up. They need to see that you're fighting for justice, not fighting to protect your reputation. She swiped to the comments section under the video. Hundreds of them. And they weren't what Dominic expected. Finally, a CEO who takes responsibility. This is what real leadership looks like. If he can clean up his own company, maybe there's hope for others. Dominic, Danielle said, I have something to ask you. And your answer is going to determine whether this story ends with justice or just becomes another news cycle that people forget about in a week. What? I want you to make me your director of ethics and culture for the entire Carver Capital Holdings empire. Not just the Palmetto House. Everything. Every hotel, every restaurant, every property you own. Dominic stared at her. Danielle, you don't understand. The company might not survive this. The legal costs alone. The company is going to survive because we're going to make it worth saving. Her voice was strong, confident, certain. We're going to turn it into a model for how businesses should treat employees and customers. We're going to prove that integrity still matters, that doing the right thing can be profitable, that courage really is contagious. And if it doesn't work? If we lose everything trying to fix something that might be too broken to save? Danielle smiled. Then at least we'll lose it trying to do something that would make your mother proud. Outside the hotel window, Dominic could see protesters gathered in the street. Some holding signs calling for his arrest, others demanding justice for Jessica Martinez and every other employee who had been hurt by his company's toxic culture. But at the front of the crowd, he noticed something that gave him hope. A small group of people holding a different kind of sign. Courage is contagious. Stand with workers. Stand with justice. And right in the middle of that group, holding the biggest sign of all, was Tommy Rodriguez, the young kitchen worker who had risked his job to warn Dominic about the threat to Danielle's safety. "You know what the hardest part about all this is?" Dominic said quietly. "What?" "Realizing that I've been so focused on getting to the top that I forgot to look around and see who I was stepping on to get there." He looked at Danielle. "But you're right. Fire doesn't destroy everything. It reveals what was already rotting." He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the protesters, the reporters, the people whose lives had been affected by his company's failures. "The question is," he said, "what are we going to grow in its place?" But before Danielle could answer, Dominic's phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything again. It was from an unknown number. "We know where you live. We know where she lives. Drop the investigation or face the consequences." The message was signed with a single initial, R. Robert Hayes, the Palmetto House assistant manager, was supposed to be in jail. But apparently, he wasn't. The text message changed everything. Not because it scared Dominic, though it did, but because it proved that this conspiracy went deeper than anyone had realized. "Robert Hayes is supposed to be in custody," Dominic said, showing the phone to Danielle. "He was arrested along with Marcus." Danielle's face went pale. "He made bail yesterday. I saw it on the local news. His lawyer claimed he was just an innocent manager who had no knowledge of what was happening in the kitchen." "And people believed that?" "Rich white men in Charleston get the benefit of the doubt," she said bitterly. "Especially when they can afford lawyers who know how to work the system." Dominic was already calling James Morrison. "James, I need you to trace a phone number. And I need you to put security details on Danielle and myself immediately." But before James could respond, Dominic's hotel room phone rang. The desk clerk downstairs. "Mr. Carver? There's a gentleman here to see you. Says it's urgent. Robert Hayes." Dominic felt his blood go cold. "Tell him I'm not available." "Sir, he says if you don't come down in the next 5 minutes, he's going to start making phone calls to every news outlet in the country. He says he has information about your other properties that you don't want becoming public." Dominic looked at Danielle. She was already shaking her head. "Don't do it," she said. "It's a trap. Whatever he thinks he has on you, whatever he's threatening to reveal, it can't be worse than what we've already uncovered." "But what if it is?" Dominic was thinking about all those other properties, all those other employees who had come forward with stories. What if there were things even worse than food tampering and intimidation? What if there were things that could destroy not just his company, but any chance of rebuilding it into something better? That's when Danielle did something that reminded Dominic why he'd been so impressed by her courage from the very beginning. She stood up, walked to the hotel room door, and opened it. "Then we go down together," she said. "Because whatever Robert Hayes thinks he can threaten us with, he's about to learn something important." "What's that?" "Courage is contagious. And we're not alone anymore." She was right. As they walked through the hotel lobby, Dominic noticed something that made his heart skip. Sitting in chairs around the lobby were people he recognized from the employee statements Danielle had shown him. Maria Santos from the Atlanta Hotel. Tommy Rodriguez from the Palmetto House Kitchen. 3 other servers and 2 housekeeping supervisors from various properties. They weren't supposed to be there. Nobody had called them. But somehow they'd come. How did they know? Dominic whispered. "I may have sent a few text messages," Danielle said with a small smile. "I told you, when people realize they're not alone, they show up." Robert Hayes was waiting in the hotel restaurant, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. He was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, looking like he was attending a business meeting rather than making threats against the people who had exposed his crimes. But when Dominic and Danielle approached his table, followed by 7 other employees, his confident expression started to crack. "I said come alone," Robert said. "And I decided not to," Dominic replied, sitting down across from him. "So what do you want?" I want you to call off your investigation. I want you to drop all charges against Marcus and myself. And I want you to issue a public statement saying that the allegations against the Palmetto House were exaggerated and taken out of context. In exchange for what? Robert smiled, that same cruel smile Dominic had seen in the kitchen. In exchange for me not revealing what I know about your empire's financial arrangements. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, wire transfer records, and accounting documents that made Dominic's stomach drop. Money laundering? Dominic said quietly. Specifically, using your restaurant and hotel businesses to clean money for some very unsavory characters. Characters who don't appreciate having their operations exposed to federal investigation. Danielle leaned forward. You're saying Dominic was involved in money laundering? I'm saying his company was. Whether he knew it or not. Robert's smile got wider. See, when you own dozens of properties and you're too busy living in your Manhattan penthouse to pay attention to day-to-day operations, sometimes your financial managers make arrangements you might not approve of. Dominic felt the room spinning. Not just because of the accusation, but because of the implication. If his company had been used for money laundering, it meant everything was compromised. The investigations, the employee testimonials, the plans for rebuilding, all of it could be dismissed as part of a criminal enterprise. Who? Dominic asked quietly. Your CFO, Gregory Walsh. Your head of accounting, Patricia Donnelly. Your facilities manager, David Chun. Robert leaned back in his chair. They've been running a very profitable side business for the past 3 years. Using your restaurant receipts to clean money for a drug trafficking operation out of Miami. That's impossible. I review all the financial reports. You review summaries prepared by Gregory Walsh. When was the last time you actually looked at individual property statements? When was the last time you personally audited cash flow from your restaurants? The answer hit Dominic like a punch to the gut. He couldn't remember. He'd been so focused on expansion, on deals, on building his empire that he delegated the day-to-day financial oversight to people he trusted. People who had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. So here's my offer, Robert continued. You make this whole discrimination thing go away, and I make sure these financial irregularities stay buried. Everyone wins. Except for the employees who were poisoned, intimidated, and threatened, Danielle said coldly. Except for Jessica Martinez, who was assaulted and driven out of town, Tommy Rodriguez added, stepping closer to the table. Except for every black customer who trusted that their food was safe, Maria Santos said. Robert looked around at the faces surrounding his table, employees who had risked their jobs, their safety, their futures to speak up about injustice, and for the first time, Dominic saw real fear in his eyes. You don't understand, Robert said. The people I'm protecting you from, they don't care about your moral crusade. They care about their money. And if this investigation exposes their operation, they're going to blame you for it. Let them, Dominic said quietly. What? Let them blame me. Dominic stood up, and one by one, the employees around the table stood with him. Because here's what you don't understand, Robert. I'd rather lose everything fighting for what's right than keep everything by staying silent about what's wrong. He pulled out his phone and dialed James Morrison's number. James, I need you to contact the FBI Financial Crimes Unit immediately. I have evidence of money laundering operations within my company, and I need a full investigation started today. Robert Hayes went white. You're making a huge mistake. No, Danielle said, placing her hand on Dominic's shoulder, he's finally making the right choice. You have no idea what you're up against, Robert said, standing up and backing toward the exit. This isn't just about restaurants and hotels. This isn't just about discrimination. You're about to expose people who kill to protect their secrets. Then I guess we'd better make sure the whole world is watching, Dominic replied. He turned to the employees who had come to support him. I need to ask you all something. And I need you to know that saying yes could put you in danger. What do you need? Maria Santos asked. I need you to help me tear down everything that's rotten in this company. And I need you to help me build something better in its place. But if we do this, if we expose not just the discrimination but the financial crimes, there are going to be people who want to stop us. How do we stop them from stopping us? Tommy asked. Danielle smiled. We make it impossible for them to hide. She pulled out her phone and opened her social media accounts. We tell the whole story. Right now. Everything. The food tampering, the threats, the money laundering, the conspiracy. We put it all out there so that if anything happens to any of us, the whole world will know why. That's incredibly dangerous, Dominic said. So is staying silent, she replied. But courage is contagious. And if we're brave enough to speak up, other people will be brave enough to listen. She started typing. A long, detailed post about everything that had happened, everything they discovered, and everything they were going to do to fix it. As she typed, she read it aloud. My name is Danielle Rivers. 3 days ago, I risked my job to warn a customer that his food had been deliberately contaminated because he was black. That customer turned out to be Dominic Carver, the billionaire who owns the restaurant where I work. Today, we discovered that the racism and cruelty I witnessed was just the surface of something much deeper. By the time she finished typing, her post was over 1,000 words long. A complete weapon of truth that would expose everything and make it impossible for anyone to silence them through threats or intimidation. Are you ready? She asked, her finger hovering over the share button. Dominic looked around at the faces of the employees who had chosen to stand with him. People who had everything to lose and nothing to gain except the satisfaction of knowing they'd done the right thing. I'm ready, he said. Danielle hit share. And within minutes, their story was spreading across the internet like wildfire. But they had no idea that the most dangerous part of their fight was just beginning. The social media post went viral in 4 hours. #CourageIsContagious started trending nationally. News outlets picked up the story. Congressional representatives called for investigations. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit fast-tracked their probe into Carver Capital Holdings. But at 3 a.m., Dominic got a phone call that made him realize how high the stakes really were. Mr. Carver? The voice was unfamiliar, heavily accented, cold as ice. My name is Miguel Santos. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't know what you're talking about. You have access to financial records that detail how my organization has been using your restaurants to process certain transactions. I need those records to disappear. The FBI already has copies of everything. The FBI can be handled. What concerns me is your little social media campaign. You've made this story too public, too visible. That creates complications for my business. Dominic felt his heart pounding. What do you want? I want you to issue a retraction. I want you to claim that your accusations were based on faulty information. I want this story to die. And if I refuse, then people start dying for real. The line went dead. Dominic immediately called James Morrison, who was already coordinating with federal agents. James, we've got a problem. I know. We've been monitoring threats against you and Danielle. But Dominic, we also have good news. Gregory Walsh, your CFO, just turned himself in. He's cooperating fully with the investigation. What did he tell them? Everything. The money laundering operation, the offshore accounts, the drug trafficking connections. But more importantly, he told them about the other companies. What other companies? Turns out your business wasn't the only one being used to clean money. This operation involves dozens of restaurants and hotels across the Southeast. All owned by different people, all with the same financial irregularities, all managed by companies connected to Miguel Santos. Dominic felt a surge of hope. So we're not alone in this. Not even close. The FBI has been building a case against Santos for 2 years. Your evidence just gave them everything they needed to make arrests. But even as James was speaking, Dominic heard something that made his blood freeze. Sirens. Police sirens, getting closer. James, are those your people? No. Our team is in unmarked vehicles. Dominic ran to his hotel window and looked down at the street. 3 black SUVs had pulled up in front of the hotel. Men in dark suits were getting out, and they weren't law enforcement. James, I think Santos just escalated this situation. Get to the roof. Now. We have a helicopter 2 minutes out. But as Dominic grabbed his phone and headed for the door, he realized something that stopped him cold. Danielle wasn't in her hotel room. She'd gone back to her apartment to get some clothes and personal items. She was alone. And if Santos's people were here, they probably knew where she lived. Dominic called her number. No answer. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. James, he said, running toward the stairwell, I'm not leaving without Danielle. Dominic, if you go to her apartment, you're walking into a trap. Then I guess I'm walking into a trap. But as Dominic reached the hotel lobby, he discovered something that restored his faith in the power of courage being contagious. The lobby was full of people. Not Santos's men, those guys were still outside, apparently waiting for backup. These were employees from Dominic's various properties. Dozens of them. They'd driven from Atlanta, Nashville, Savannah, even Miami. Word of the social media post had spread through the network of workers, and they'd come to Charleston to stand together. Mr. Carver? It was Maria Santos, and Dominic suddenly realized the irony of her having the same last name as the drug trafficker who was threatening them. We're not going to let them intimidate us into silence. Maria, this is dangerous. These people have been killed before. So have poverty and racism and systematic oppression, she replied. At least this time we're fighting back. Tommy Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, we've been thinking. If they wanted to just kill us quietly, they would have done it already. But they can't, because too many people are watching now. The only power they have left is fear. And we're not afraid anymore, added Patricia Williams, a housekeeper from the Nashville property. That's when Dominic heard something that made his heart skip. His phone was ringing. Danielle's number. Dominic. Her voice was shaky but determined. I'm okay. But I'm not alone. Where are you? I'm at my apartment, but so are about 30 other people. Word got out that Santos's men were looking for me, and people just started showing up. Neighbors, co-workers, people from other restaurants who heard about what we're doing. Danielle, you need to get out of there. No, I don't. Because I just got a call from Jessica Martinez. Dominic felt the world stop spinning. She's flying back from Mexico. Tonight. She's going to testify about everything that happened to her. And she's bringing documentation that proves Santos's operation has been targeting women who speak up about workplace discrimination. What kind of documentation? Photos of her injuries. Medical records that prove she was assaulted, not accidentally injured. And phone records showing that Robert Hayes was in contact with known associates of Miguel Santos, both before and after her accident. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about money laundering. This was about using violence and intimidation to maintain a system of oppression. Santos wasn't just cleaning drug money through restaurants. He was specifically targeting businesses where he could exploit vulnerable workers and silence anyone who tried to speak up. Danielle, Dominic said, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't move, don't go outside, don't trust anyone you don't know. Why? Because you just became the most important witness in a federal case that's going to bring down an entire criminal organization. That's when the lights in the hotel lobby suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Through the lobby windows, Dominic could see that the black SUVs had been joined by more vehicles. Santos's men were preparing for some kind of assault. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that Dominic and Danielle were fighting this battle alone. As Dominic and the assembled employees watched through the lobby windows, a convoy of FBI vehicles surrounded the hotel. Federal agents in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn, shouting orders at Santos's men. This is the FBI. You're surrounded. Drop your weapons and get on the ground. The battle lasted exactly 30 seconds. Santos's men, realizing they were outnumbered and outgunned, surrendered without firing a shot. James Morrison came through the hotel entrance, his usually calm demeanor replaced by something that looked like satisfaction. "Miguel Santos was arrested 20 minutes ago in Miami," he announced to the room. "Along with 12 associates, including your former CFO and the private investigator who attacked Jessica Martinez." The lobby erupted in cheers and applause. "But more importantly," James continued, "we found evidence that Santos's operation was targeting at least 40 businesses across 6 states. All using the same model: exploit vulnerable workers, silence anyone who speaks up, use the businesses to clean money from drug trafficking." Dominic felt a weight lifting off his shoulders that he hadn't even realized was there. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you get to do what you said you wanted to do," James replied. "You get to tear down everything that's rotten and build something better." Dominic looked around the lobby at all the employees who had risked everything to stand with him. People who had proven that courage really was contagious, that integrity still matters, that ordinary people could defeat systems of oppression when they refused to stay silent. "So," he said to the room, "who's ready to change the world?" The answer was unanimous. 6 months later, Dominic stood in the renovated dining room of the Palmetto House, watching Danielle Rivers address a room full of restaurant industry executives, civil rights leaders, and federal investigators. She was wearing a business suit instead of a server's uniform. Her title was now Director of Ethics and Culture for Carver Capital Holdings, but more importantly, she was about to become a second-year law student at Charleston School of Law, with her tuition fully paid by a scholarship fund Dominic had established for employees pursuing education. The Confederate portraits were gone, replaced by artwork from local black artists. The kitchen had been completely rebuilt with transparent windows so diners could see their food being prepared. Every employee had been through comprehensive bias training, and the staff now reflected the diversity of Charleston's community. But the real transformation went deeper than cosmetics. "When I first started working here," Danielle was saying to the assembled crowd, "I thought my job was to stay quiet, keep my head down and survive. I thought speaking up about injustice would cost me everything." She paused, looking directly at Dominic. "What I learned was that staying silent was costing me something much more valuable than a job. It was costing me my integrity, my self-respect, my belief that things could actually change." The audience was completely quiet, hanging on every word. "But I also learned something else. I learned that when one person has the courage to speak up, it gives other people permission to do the same. Courage is contagious. And when enough people catch it, systems that seemed unchangeable suddenly become very fragile." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, showing statistics that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. Since the exposure of the Santos operation and the transformation of Carver Capital Holdings, 43 other restaurant companies had voluntarily submitted to ethics audits. 18 had discovered and corrected discriminatory practices. 7 had found evidence of financial crimes and cooperated with federal investigations. The model Dominic and Danielle had created, transparency, employee empowerment, community accountability, was spreading throughout the industry. "But the numbers only tell part of the story," Danielle continued. "The real story is about what happens when people realize they have power." She clicked on a video testimonial from Maria Santos, who had been promoted to Director of Operations for all Carver Capital Holdings properties in Georgia. "I used to think that fighting discrimination meant finding a new job," Maria said in the video. "Now I realize it means making your current job worthy of the people who do it." Another video showed Tommy Rodriguez, who was now head chef at the Palmetto House and had implemented a program where kitchen staff from different backgrounds taught each other traditional recipes from their cultures. "The menu used to be about exclusion," Tommy said. "Now it's about celebration." But the most powerful testimony came from Jessica Martinez, who had returned from Mexico not just to testify in the Santos trial, but to take a position as Regional Director of Employee Safety for the entire company. "They thought they could silence me with violence," Jessica said in her video. "They thought they could scare me into disappearing. What they didn't understand was that surviving their attack made me stronger, not weaker. And when I saw other people finding the courage to speak up, I realized I had an obligation to use my voice too." As Danielle finished her presentation, the audience erupted in sustained applause. But Dominic wasn't focused on the clapping. He was focused on something much more meaningful. In the back of the room, his mother Sarah was wiping tears from her eyes. She'd driven down from Detroit to see the transformation of the Palmetto house for herself. At 72 years old, she'd never expected to see the day when her son's business would become a model for how to treat workers with dignity and respect. After the presentation, as the crowd mingled and networked, Sarah approached Dominic and Danielle. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Which one of us?" Dominic asked. "Both of you. But especially you, baby." She looked at her son with eyes full of love and admiration. "You remembered where you came from. And more importantly, you remembered why it matters." Sarah turned to Danielle. "And you, young lady. You remind me of myself when I was your age. Except you're braver than I ever was." "I don't think I'm brave," Danielle replied. "I think I just got tired of being afraid." "That's what bravery is," Sarah said with a smile. "Being afraid but doing what's right anyway." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Dominic and Danielle found themselves alone in the dining room that had started their incredible journey. "So," Dominic said, "any regrets? About speaking up? About risking everything? About turning our lives upside down to fight for what's right?" Danielle shook her head. "Not one. Even though it cost you months of your life, put you in danger, and completely changed your career plans? Especially because of that." She smiled. "You know what I realized? I thought I wanted to be a lawyer so I could fight injustice in courtrooms. But what we did here, this was fighting injustice in the real world. This was proving that ordinary people can change systems that seem too big and too powerful to defeat. And now I'm going to finish law school so I can help other people do the same thing. Because this isn't just about one restaurant or one company. This is about proving that integrity still matters, that courage is contagious, that speaking up for what's right is always worth the risk." Dominic looked around the transformed dining room, the diverse staff, the inclusive artwork, the transparent kitchen, the customers from all backgrounds enjoying meals prepared with respect and care. "You know what the best part is," he said. "What?" "My mother always told me that fire doesn't destroy everything. It reveals what was already rotting, and it clears the ground so something better can grow." He gestured toward the dining room where families of all races were sharing meals, where servers moved with pride and dignity, where the kitchen hummed with the sounds of collaboration rather than cruelty. "This," he said, "is what grows when you clear away the rot." 6 months later, Danielle Rivers was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine as one of 30 under 30 leaders changing corporate culture. The article described how her courage to slip a note to a customer had sparked a transformation that was reshaping an entire industry. But more importantly, that same week, a young black server at a restaurant in Houston read Danielle's story and decided to document discriminatory practices she'd been witnessing. Her evidence led to another federal investigation, more arrests, and more companies committing to change. Because courage, it turns out, really is contagious. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to slip a note that says, "This place is not safe," and another person brave enough to do something about it. The revolution started with a napkin folded in half. It ended with an entire industry learning that when people refuse to stay silent, systems of oppression don't stand a chance. And every day, in restaurants and hotels and businesses across the country, employees and customers alike are discovering something that Dominic and Danielle proved on that humid Tuesday evening in Charleston. Integrity still matters. Justice is still possible. And courage is still contagious. What injustice have you seen? Share this video and let others know that speaking up for what's right is always worth the risk. Like this video if you believe courage is contagious. Subscribe for more true stories of ordinary people changing the world.